On January 1st, 2025, Ukraine's five-year transit agreement with the Russian state-owned oil and gas company Gazprom will expire, which brings northern Siberian gas to Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and Austria, shutting down a major Russian natural gas pathway to Europe. However, before that could happen, the Russian company Gazprom suddenly stopped selling gas to Austria last week after Austrian oil and gas company OMV said it would stop paying Gazprom to offset a €230 million arbitration award that it won from the International Chamber of Commerce over a previous gas cutoff. In 2022, Russia cut off most natural gas supplies to Europe, citing disputes over payments in roubles, a move European leaders described as energy blackmail over their support to Ukraine against Russia's invasion. European governments had a scramble to arrange alternative supplies at higher prices, much of which was liquefied natural gas brought by ships from the US and Qatar. Austria gets the bulk of its natural gas from Russia, as much as 98% till December last year, according to Energy Minister Leonore Gewessler. Before I proceed, I encourage you to consider liking the video and don't forget to share your views on the topic in the comment section below. Your feedback is invaluable for us and a wider audience around the world. Ukraine has said it will not extend the transit agreement with Russia's Gazprom beyond January 2025 in a bid to choke off a source of income that Kyiv says Russia uses to fund its war. Although Russia said it is ready to continue the transit deal, urging Europeans to persuade Ukraine to extend the contract, Ukraine has said it won't budge. Russian natural gas supplies were a cornerstone for European energy security before Moscow's February 2022 invasion, when it temporarily cut off 80 billion cubic meters of gas supplies to the continent in response to sanctions and a payment dispute. The cutoff dealt a major blow to Europe's economy that remains palpable in 2024, according to an International Monetary Fund analysis. Cold War-era supply is going to end. Austrian gas imports from Russia date back to the Cold War. Austria was one of the first Western countries to import gas from the then Soviet Union in 1968, with the Baumgarten hub near the border with Slovakia handling deliveries via Ukraine. But the relationship was due to come to an end early next year anyway, with the expiration of the contract between Russian Gazprom and Ukrainian OMV. In the face of rising uncertainty around Russian gas supplies to Europe, Austria has also increased efforts to secure supply from other countries such as Turkey and Norway. Olga Kharkova, Deputy Director of European Energy Security at the Washington-based Atlantic Council, said those countries will have to live with this decision, explaining that they will need to secure alternative routes. Turkey, for example, offers the only other operational pipeline for Europe-bound Russian energy. Observers say some EU countries have taken the issue more seriously than others. For example, Germany and the Czech Republic have invested heavily in liquefied natural gas terminals in record time, said Kharkova. Some European landlocked countries like the Czech Republic are looking for alternative supplies and options, whereas like Hungary have doubled down on their reliance on Russia, while Slovakia and Austria have increased Russian imports. Christopher Halser, Rystad's gas and LNG analyst, said that although some European nations would prefer to maintain Russian gas deliveries via Ukraine, it's a difficult sell for the EU. He expressed confidence in Europe's political will and supply chain logistics to forfeit dependence on Ukraine's pipelines for Russian gas. Before the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Russia supplied the EU with around 40% of its gas needs. The annual State of the EU Energy Union report recognizes that although consumption of Russian gas has fallen dramatically from 150 billion cubic meters or 45% of all imports before the invasion, the country still relied on Russia for 18% of imports in the 8 months to August, slightly more than the total LNG imports from the US, meaning Russia is still Europe's second largest supplier after Norway. Despite a huge drop in supply since the Kremlin began its all-out war on Ukraine, the EU still relies on Russia for almost a fifth of its gas supplies and energy. Commissioner Kadri Simpson demurred when asked whether the bloc was ready to include it in an ever-expanding sanctions regime. Although Russia's pipeline exports to Europe has decreased, Moscow has compensated for some of the shortfall with LNG deliveries via sea, road, and rail, seeing the overall share of European LNG imports increased from 15% to 19%. However, calls for further expansion are unlikely given Western sanctions against Russia and the current infrastructure. Recently, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen talked with US President-elect Donald Trump during a phone call and brought up LNG delivery to the EU. LNG is one of the topics that we touched upon. I would not say discussed, she told reporters in Budapest. We still get a whole lot of LNG from Russia. Why not replace it with American LNG, which is cheaper and brings down our energy prices? German Chancellor Olaf Scholz spoke to President Vladimir Putin on Friday last week for the first time in nearly 2 years, as European leaders wait to hear Donald Trump's ideas on ending the biggest land war in Europe since World War II. According to the Kremlin, Putin told Scholz that Russia had always fulfilled its contractual obligations for energy supplies and was ready for mutually beneficial cooperation if the German side shows interest in this. Soviet and post-Soviet leaders spent half a century from the discovery of major Siberian gas deposits in the post-World War II years building up an energy business that linked to Soviet Union, then Russia, and Germany, by far Europe's biggest economy. War and explosions have destroyed that link, damaging the economies of both countries. At its peak, Russia was supplying 40% of Europe's gas, but since the war started in 2022, Gazprom has lost market share to Norway, the United States, and Qatar. Still, Russia shipped some 15 billion cubic meters of gas via Ukraine in 2023, which is about 8% of peak Russian gas flows to Europe via various routes in 2018-19. In 2023, the Ukraine transit route met 65% of gas demand in Austria and its eastern neighbors Hungary and Slovakia, according to the International Energy Agency. Without Austria, significant Russian supplies will only go to 2 European countries, Hungary and Slovakia. In Hungary's case, via a pipeline running mostly through Turkey. The other pipeline, the Yamal-Europe pipeline via Belarus, was closed after a dispute. While Russia blamed the United States and the UK for the explosions under the Baltic Sea that closed the Nord Stream route, Washington and London have denied they blew up the pipelines. The Wall Street Journal has reported that Ukrainian officials were behind the attack. However, Ukraine has also denied that. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for new videos on important international topics.